You think I'm too young to lead you all?
There's no way we are going to have a lady as our coach.
Why, you're too scared to have me as your coach, or you should be scared of not winning. From now on, y'all will do things my way. And if you're not okay with that, step out while you still can.
On the night before the biggest game of their lives, someone tried to make sure she would never coach again. She was beaten, left in a dark parking lot, alone. And the next morning, those young men stood on that court without her. The bench where she always sat was empty. They looked around, they checked their phones, they called her name, and nothing came back. Nothing at all. The opposing team saw it. They laughed. They pointed at that empty bench like it was the funniest thing they had seen all season. And for one long, terrifying moment, it looked like they were right. But here is what nobody expected. She came anyway. This is the story of Maya Carter, a 26-year-old woman who walked into a basketball court full of young men who did not want her there, who dismissed her before she ever opened
Get
her
it.
mouth, who questioned her right
Watch this
to
spin.
stand at that whiteboard, who dug up
Cross
her
you up.
past and held it over her head
Effortless.
like a weapon, and who, in spite of every single one of those things, built something so powerful inside that team that a rival program began to fear them. And then, the night before everything was supposed to matter most, someone tried to take her away from it permanently. This is the story of the coach they counted out. Stay with me all the way to the end, because the last few minutes of this story are going to land somewhere deep inside of you, and you are not going to see it coming. Before we go anywhere, I need to place 3 questions in front of you, and I want you to carry them with you through this entire story. The first question is this: how does a woman that nobody respects, that nobody takes seriously, that nobody even wants in the building, become the reason an entire opposing team starts losing sleep at night? How does that happen? The second question is darker. Who was so threatened by what Maya Carter was building, so frightened by her success, that they decided the only answer was to physically hurt her the night before the most important game of the season? And the third question is the one that is going to stay with you long after this video is over. When those young men stepped onto that court the following morning, no coach, no game plan, no word from her, what do you think they did? I want you to sit with those questions, because every segment of this story is going to peel back another layer of the answer. And I promise you, not one of those answers is what you think it is right now. There is a moment coming in this video where everything you thought you understood about this story is going to shift completely. And when it does, I think you are going to want to share this with someone. So before we go deeper, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. We would love to hear from you. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Maya Carter grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, the third of 4 children in a household that ran on discipline and basketball. Her father coached youth leagues on weekends and worked maintenance at the school district all week. Her mother worked nights at a hospital laundry facility and somehow still made it to every game. Maya grew up watching her father coach from the sideline, watching how he read the court, how he adjusted at halftime, how he talked to players who were frustrated or scared or too proud to admit they needed help. She absorbed all of it. By the time she was in high school, she was the kind of student athlete that coaches remembered. Not always the loudest voice in the room, not always the most flashy, but always paying attention. She played through high school and into a community college program, and even there, People who watched her closely could see that her mind was working at a different level than most of her teammates. She was not just playing the game, she was studying it. She was cataloging it. She would go back and watch recordings of games she had already played in and take written notes about what had worked and what had not. Her coaches noticed. The problem was, Maya Carter also had something else inside of her that had nothing to do with basketball. She had an anger that she had carried for a long time. A raw, fast-burning kind of anger that would surface under pressure. And in her early 20s, it cost her. It cost her relationships. It cost her opportunities. And for a period of time, it cost her the thing she wanted most. A real coaching role that someone would take seriously. This is the part of Maya Carter's story that people always want to use against her. And yes, there were incidents. There were moments of confrontation that got documented and circulated. There was a blow-up during a training session in her early coaching days that became the story everyone remembered about her, no matter what came after it. But here is what those same people never mentioned in the same breath. Maya Carter recognized it. She went and got help, not reluctantly, not because someone forced her, but because she sat down one evening and made a decision that she was not going to let the worst version of herself be the one that defined her life. She entered therapy. She committed to it. She spent the better part of 8 months doing the kind of hard, uncomfortable interior work that most people will talk about doing and never actually do. She came out the other side not softer, but steadier. And that distinction matters more than most people understand. By the time the phone call came, Maya Carter was 26 years old. She had her certification, she had her knowledge, and she had a quiet confidence that had been forged in real fire. The call came from a program coordinator who had a problem. A competitive team heading into a regional tournament. No head coach, and not enough time to find someone with a long resume. Someone had passed Maya Carter's name along. The coordinator made the call almost reluctantly because the name came with that old story attached to it. But the timeline was tight. The tournament was weeks away, and Maya said yes before the coordinator had finished the sentence. What she did not know when she said yes was that the team she was walking into had already decided, before they ever met her, that they were not going to make it easy. The Westfield Titans were a group of young men between the ages of 22 and 25, and they were talented, genuinely talented. Marcus Johnson, the team's captain, had been playing organized ball since he was 8 years old and had the kind of competitive intelligence that showed up in the numbers, not just points, but decisions, the kind of decisions that told you a player understood the game beyond the surface level. Deshaun, the team's fastest player, had the reflexes and the instincts, but had a habit of freelancing when the pressure got high, of going rogue on the court when the structure broke down. Tyler was the enforcer, physical, relentless, and deeply proud, the kind of player who needed to believe in a system before he would follow it. Jamal and Kevin rounded out the core rotation, dependable players who took their cues from how Marcus was feeling on any given day, and how Marcus was feeling when Maya Carter walked through that gym door for the first time. Was skeptical. The team had heard things before she arrived. Some of it was secondhand, and some of it was straight-up rumor. But the version of Maya Carter that reached them before she could introduce herself was the old version. The one who had blown up at a player, the one who had anger issues, the one who was barely older than they were, and had no real head coaching experience at this level. Marcus sat in that first meeting and said almost nothing. But his silence was not respectful. It was the silence of a man who had already made up his mind. Deshaun was less subtle. He asked, right there in the first session, who exactly had recommended her and whether anyone had looked into her background. Jamal and Kevin exchanged glances. Tyler crossed his arms and did not uncross them for the entire meeting. And Maya Carter sat there and watched all of it. And she did not flinch, and she did not raise her voice, and she did not try to win them over with anything other than one single sentence. She looked at the group and she said quietly, "I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to win. Whether you help me with that is up to you." And then she handed out the training schedule and moved on. The first 2 weeks were, to put it plainly, ugly. Not explosively ugly. Not a dramatic blow-up or a shouting match. Just the slow, daily grind of being ignored by people who had decided you were not worth listening to. Maya would draw up a play, and Deshaun would improvise in the opposite direction. She would call a timeout, and Tyler would jog over, like he had all the time in the world. She would give individual feedback, and the player she was addressing would nod and then do exactly what he had been doing before she said a word. Marcus was the hardest to read. He was too smart and too controlled to openly disrespect her. But he also was not fully implementing what she was teaching. He was doing just enough to make it unclear whether he was engaging or performing engagement. And there is a difference. Maya Carter knew the difference. What made it worse was that some of the disrespect was not even about basketball. It was personal. Comments made just loud enough to hear. Jokes about her age, about whether she actually knew the game, about whether this was some kind of publicity effort. Someone on the team had posted something on social media, not tagging the program directly, but vague enough that everyone who needed to understand it did. The old story about her anger resurfaced in group chats. Some of the players convinced themselves that if they pushed hard enough, if they made it uncomfortable enough, she would simply leave. And to be very honest, there was probably a version of Maya Carter from a few years prior who would have combusted or shut down or walked out and let the whole thing collapse. But that was not the woman standing in that gym in those 2 weeks. That was not who she had become. Here is the thing about real inner work, and I want you to hear this, because it matters to the whole story. When you have genuinely done the work of understanding your own anger, your own triggers, your own patterns, you do not stop feeling those things. The frustration was there. Maya Carter felt every single one of those moments. She felt the sting of being talked over, of being laughed at quietly, of knowing that the moment she turned her back, the eye rolls were happening. She felt it, but feeling it and being controlled by it are two entirely different things. And she had put in too much work, too many sessions, too many hard conversations with herself to let the feeling drive the car. She let it sit in the back seat, and she kept her hands on the wheel. At the start of week 3, Maya Carter stopped trying to ease them in. She had given them time to adjust, time to question, time to resist, and they had used all of it. So she did something that nobody on that team expected. She got strict, not loud, strict. There is a difference that not everyone understands until they have lived it. Loud is noise. Strict is structure. She arrived at practice before anyone else every single day. She had the drills mapped out in detail before a single player walked through the door. She did not ask for effort. She set conditions that made effort the only option available. If a play was not executed correctly, they ran it again and again. Not with screaming, not with punishment, just with the calm, immovable expectation that they were going to get it right. And she was going to stand right there until they did. The first time she ran a session that way, the team spent 40 minutes on a single defensive rotation. 40 minutes. Some of the players were furious. Maya did not acknowledge the fury. She just pointed at the starting position and said, again. Something started to crack around day 4 of week 3, and it cracked first in Marcus Johnson. Marcus had been watching her, really watching, with that competitive intelligence of his. And he had started to notice something that he did not want to admit. The plays she was drawing up were smart. Not just functional smart, but elegant smart. The kind of basketball thinking that accounted for multiple variables at once, that left room for adjustment mid-play without everything falling apart. He ran a set she had designed during a scrimmage, ran it the way she had diagrammed it, and it worked so cleanly that for a moment, he just stood there in the middle of the court. And Maya Carter looked at him from the sideline and said nothing. She did not say, "I told you so." She did not make a face or gesture that said, "You see?" She just made a small note on her clipboard. And somehow, the restraint of that, the absolute refusal to take a victory lap when she had every right to, hit Marcus harder than anything she could have said out loud. By the end of week 3, something had shifted in the temperature of that gym. Deshaun started running plays before being told twice. Tyler uncrossed his arms. Jamal began staying late, asking Maya questions about specific defensive assignments, and she answered every one of them with the same focused patience she had been holding on to since day 1. Kevin started coming to practice early. Not by much, 5 or 10 minutes, but early. And then one evening, after a particularly hard session that had ended with the team executing a complex full-court press so cleanly that even the players themselves were surprised, Marcus Johnson stayed back. The rest of the team had filtered out. It was just him and Maya Carter in that gym, and he walked up to her with his hands in the pockets of his warm-up jacket, and he said, "Coach, I owe you an apology for the way we treated you from jump. That wasn't right." Maya let the silence sit for exactly the amount of time it needed to, and then she looked at him and said, "I know. We're good." That was it. No lecture, no list of everything he had put her through. No conditional forgiveness. Just forward movement. And Marcus Johnson never forgot that. One by one, the rest of them came to her. Not as a group, not in some big organized moment, but quietly, individually, in the margins of the day. Deshaun found her in the hallway before a practice and apologized for the social media incident. He could not look her in the eye when he said it. She told him she appreciated it and left it at that. Tyler came to her after a session and stood there for almost 30 seconds without speaking, and then said that he respected what she was doing. Jamal wrote it in a note that he left on the whiteboard. Short, handwritten, no drama. Kevin just started showing up differently. Maya received all of it the same way, without fanfare, without making anyone pay an emotional price to get back into her good graces. She had been where they were. She understood what it cost a young person to admit they had been wrong. She was not going to charge them extra for it. What happened to that team in the weeks that followed is the part of this story that I want you to hold on to. Because it was not just that they got better at basketball, though they absolutely did. It was something deeper than execution and strategy. Maya Carter had a philosophy that she had carried for years. And now that the team was actually listening, she began to teach it fully. She believed that fear was not the enemy of performance. Avoidance was. She believed that the reason most people broke down under pressure was not because the pressure was too much, but because they had spent so long running from the feeling of pressure that when it arrived, it was completely unfamiliar. So she did something unconventional. She made practice feel like pressure. She made drills feel like stakes. She simulated the emotional experience of high-stakes competition so often and so deliberately that by the time the team was actually standing in front of a real opponent, the feeling was not foreign. It was almost like home. She would talk to them during sessions, not motivational speeches, not prepared remarks, just real conversation while they were in the middle of executing. She would say things like, "That tightness in your chest right now, that's not a warning sign. That's your body doing its job. Let it do its job." Or she would say, "The moment you start thinking about what you might lose is the moment you stop being present. Come back. Right now. Come back." These were not things she had read in a coaching manual. These were things she had learned in therapy, in long sessions of honest self-examination, in the process of learning to manage her own internal weather. She was transmitting something real, and the players could feel the difference between that and a rehearsed motivational line. It landed in them differently. It stuck. The tournament began in late November. Westfield opened against a program that had beaten them 2 seasons in a row, and Maya's team handled them with a composure that nobody expected from a group that had been in rebuilding mode just weeks earlier. Word began to travel the way word travels in competitive circles, quietly but quickly. Other coaches were paying attention. Scouts who had come to watch other teams found themselves watching Westfield more than they had planned to. There was something different in how those young men moved. Not just the plays, the demeanor, the absence of panic, the way they looked at each other in tight moments, that small nod, that steady breath, the communication that had nothing to do with words. Opponents who expected them to fold under pressure found instead a team that seemed to get calmer as the stakes got higher. That was not accidental. That was Maya Carter's fingerprints on everything. The team they were set to face in the finals was a program called the Northside Ravens, and they had a reputation that preceded them in every building they entered. They were physical, they were aggressive, and they had a coach who had built his entire program on intimidation, a man named Ray Harmon, who had been coaching at that level for over a decade and who did not like to lose. Harmon had watched tape of Westfield's tournament run. He had studied their plays. And the more he studied, the more he came back to the same conclusion, that the plays themselves were not what made Westfield dangerous. What made Westfield dangerous was the person drawing those plays on the whiteboard. And the person drawing them was a 26-year-old woman named Maya Carter, who had walked into a situation that everyone expected to fail and had built something that was now threatening everything he had worked for. Ray Harmon was not accustomed to feeling threatened. And when men like Ray Harmon feel threatened, they do not always make rational decisions. It was a Thursday night. The championship game was scheduled for Friday at 6 in the evening. Maya Carter had stayed late at the facility, the way she always did the night before a big game. Reviewing tape one last time, making adjustments to the game plan, writing out the individual notes she would give to each player before warm-ups the next day. She was thorough in a way that could not be faked. The lights in the building had been off for hours when she finally packed her bag and headed to her car. The parking lot was nearly empty. She noticed the cars parked oddly, but did not stop to think about it. She was already running through Friday's opening possession in her head. She never saw them coming. There were 3 men. 2 of them she had never seen before. The third she would later identify as someone connected to Ray Harmon's program, a face she had seen at the previous games, standing near Harmon's bench. They came at her from multiple angles, and they were not trying to scare her. They were trying to hurt her badly enough that she would not be able to coach the following morning. And they succeeded. At least, that was what they believed when they left her on that pavement. She was on the ground when they walked away. She did not get up immediately. For a long time, she did not move at all. It was a security guard making his rounds that found her. An ambulance was called. She was taken to Cleveland General. And the night that was supposed to be her team's final preparation was instead a night of silence from the woman who had held all of it together. Marcus Johnson woke up to no message. That was the first sign. Maya always sent the team a message the morning of a game. Nothing long, just a line or two, something that was meant to land before the day fully started. His phone was quiet. He checked it twice, put it down, picked it up again. He sent a message to the group chain. "Anyone here from Coach?" Nothing. Kevin called her phone. No answer. Deshaun tried. Voicemail. Tyler reached out to the program coordinator, who did not know anything either. By the time the team arrived at the facility for warm-ups, the bench where Maya Carter always sat, organized, game notes face down, water bottle to the left, was empty. Just an empty seat and a cold gym and a group of young men who were trying very hard not to let each other see how frightened they were. The Ravens arrived. And when Ray Harmon's players looked across the court and saw that empty bench, they did what Harmon had likely told them to do. They made it a performance. They were loud about it. They pointed. They laughed. One of the Ravens players jogged past Westfield's warm-up line and said, loud enough to be heard, "Where's your little coach?" Couldn't make it? Someone else said she had probably quit when she figured out they were going to lose anyway. And Marcus Johnson stood there and absorbed every word of it without responding. Because somewhere in the last 2 months, Maya Carter had put something in him that knew when to save the energy for what mattered. But he was shaking, and not from the cold. The warm-up clock was winding down. Marcus had gathered the team in a tight circle near their bench and was speaking to them, low and measured, trying to hold the thing together using what he had: their history with each other, their wins, the memory of every drill they had run, every correction they had made, every moment in that gym when Maya Carter had said again, and they had done it again, and he almost had them. Almost. But there is a specific kind of fear that comes from feeling abandoned at the moment you need someone most, and it does not respond to pep talks the same way it responds to presence. And what those young men needed was presence. What they needed was her. The facility door opened. It was not dramatic. There was no announcement. She just walked through the door the way she always did. Direct, purposeful, straight toward the court. She was moving carefully. Anyone who looked closely could see that. The bandaging was visible on her forearm and along the left side of her jaw. She was holding herself the way a person holds themselves when something hurts. And they have made the decision that the pain does not get a vote today. She walked straight to the bench, set down the same clipboard she always carried, and looked up at the team. Every single face, one by one, the way she had done in that very first meeting when none of them wanted to be there. And she said, quietly, "I told you I'd be here. Now let's go to work." Nobody said anything. Kevin turned away. He was crying, and he did not want her to see it, but she saw it. Deshawn let out a breath that sounded like it had been held for hours. Marcus Johnson looked at her for a long moment and then nodded once. The nod of a man who has just had something returned to him that he thought was gone. The game was everything Maya Carter had prepared them for. The Ravens came out physical and aggressive, exactly as Harmon had always coached them, pressing early, trying to force the panic response that had beaten programs with more experience than Westfield. But panic requires unfamiliarity. And after 2 months of being made to face pressure in practice, of being walked through the interior experience of high stakes, in controlled conditions, of being taught to return to the present moment when fear started pulling them out of it, Westfield did not panic. They bent early on the way any team bends when the opposition is good and the pressure is real. But they did not break. And every time there was a pause in play, every timeout, every moment they could get back to that bench and see Maya Carter sitting there with her clipboard and her steady eyes. They steadied. She called adjustments that she had prepared, and some that she made in real time, reading what the Ravens were doing, the way someone reads a book they have studied before. And the Ravens, who had come in expecting a fragmented team with no direction and no leadership, found the opposite. When the final buzzer sounded, Westfield had won, and the celebration was real. The jumping, the yelling, the pile-on that happens when young men who have worked hard for something finally get to hold it. But the moment that mattered most in that gym, the moment that the people who were there will describe first when they tell this story years later, was when the noise settled just enough and the whole team turned as one toward their coach. And she was standing at the bench, still holding the clipboard, and she was not shouting or jumping. She was just looking at them, and her eyes were full, and she nodded, and she said, "That was yours. Every bit of that was yours." And Marcus Johnson walked straight to her and put his arms around her, carefully, because she was hurt, and he knew it, and the rest of them followed. Ray Harmon did not walk across the court to shake hands. He was already gone by the time the celebration started. In the days that followed, the events of that Thursday night parking lot became known. Maya had filed a report from her hospital bed. The investigation moved quickly once the witness accounts and facility camera footage were compiled. Harmon lost his position. The individuals who had carried out the assault faced criminal charges. The story reached local news, then regional outlets, and then kind of social media reach that come when something true and outrageous meets a story people are already emotionally invested in. But none of that is what I want to spend the final moments of this story on. What I want to spend the final moments on is a Saturday morning, the day after the championship, the day after the win, the day after everything. Maya Carter was lying in a hospital bed at Cleveland General, and she had sent the team a message that morning. The same kind of short, direct message she always sent on game day mornings, because she had not sent one the day before, and she felt that she owed them one. The message said, "You were everything I knew you were going to be. I am proud of each one of you." And then the door opened. It was Marcus Johnson, carrying a paper grocery bag. Behind him was Deshawn, holding a handmade card that had clearly been worked on by more than one person. Tyler had flowers, the kind that come wrapped in plastic from a corner store, the kind that mean more than the expensive kind, because of what they say about the impulse behind them. Jamal brought food. Kevin sat down in the chair next to her bed and did not say anything for a while, and then said simply, "We're not going anywhere, Coach." They stayed for hours. They came back the next day, and the day after that. Maya Carter returned to coaching Westfield the following season. They won. And the season after that, they won again. The strategy she had built, the philosophy she had transmitted into those young men, had become the foundation that the program stood on. And the young men who had once looked at an empty chair and felt nothing but fear had learned something that you cannot diagram on a whiteboard. They had learned what it looks like when someone chooses you, even when it costs them everything to do it. They had learned what real coaching is, and they carried it into everything they did after that gym, after that court, after that season. Because the truth is, the wins were never just about basketball. They were about what happens when a person who has done the hard work of becoming steady walks into a room full of doubt and refuses to leave. That is the whole story. That is who Maya Carter is. So I want to ask you something before you go. In your own life, right now, today, is there someone you have counted out too early? Someone whose past you have held against them more firmly than you have considered their present? Someone who has done the work of changing and has not been given the grace of being seen differently. Because this story is not just about a young woman and a basketball team in Cleveland. This story is about all of us and the space we make or refuse to make for people who are trying. Maya Carter deserved that space. She fought for it when it was not given. And every single thing that followed, every win, every apology, every card left on a hospital bedside table, was the result of her refusing to let the absence of that grace stop her. Please leave a comment below. Tell me what hit you hardest. Tell me where you are watching from. Share this with one person who needs to hear it today. And if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Because the next story we are bringing you is one that I promise you have never heard told this way before. See you soon, and thanks for watching.